31. Not a year, not an age, a count. 31 months of payments, $2,847 each, processed through my name, deposited to an account I'd never opened, at a bank branch I had never walked into, under a power of attorney I had signed while I was under general anesthesia, and do not remember signing because I was under general anesthesia. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon in July of 2024. I was sitting at my desk, third from the window, north side of the office. The kind of afternoon where the light comes through the blinds at a low angle and makes everything look like it's from a different decade. I was running a quality review audit. Routine, quarterly, the kind of work my hands do while part of my brain thinks about what to make for dinner. I pulled a file from the batch. I read the name of the representative payee. The name was mine. I put my pen down. I did not pick it up again for a long time. I looked at the barrel cactus on the corner of my desk, and I thought about whether I had watered it on Friday. I had. I didn't need it. I did it anyway. That thought about the cactus, about watering something that didn't need water, was the first thought I had when I found out that my mother and my sister had been routing $88,257 in federal disability payments through my stolen identity for 2.5 years. I am 36 years old. I have been a claims examiner at the Social Security Administration field office in Huntington, West Virginia for 9 years. I know exactly what a forged signature looks like on a federal authorization document. I know the pressure variance, the baseline inconsistency, the specific way someone slows down on letters they're less certain of when they're copying a signature that isn't theirs. I have been finding that pattern in other people's files for 9 years. I just hadn't looked at my own. Before I tell you how we got there, if this story is finding you at the right time, please like and subscribe. It means more than I can explain. And I want to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Delia Marsh. I'm 36 years old. I'm a federal claims examiner in Huntington, West Virginia. And this is the story of what I found in a file I wasn't supposed to be looking at, and what I decided to do about it. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about the specific moment you realize that the person you've been protecting most carefully was yourself, least of all. That moment took me 36 years to arrive at. I want to tell you exactly how it happened. To understand why that Tuesday hit the way it did, I need to take you back to the fall of 2018 when I was 29 years old and had just been promoted to senior examiner, which in my office meant a 7% pay increase, a slightly better seat assignment, and the specific, quiet satisfaction of having been recognized for something you've been doing correctly for 2 years before anyone noticed. I live in a second-floor apartment on Hal Greer Boulevard in Huntington. The building is brick, built in the 1960s with radiators that clang in winter, and a super named Gerald who responds to maintenance requests within 48 hours, if you ask nicely, and within 4 days if you don't. My windows face east, which means I get the morning light and lose it by noon, which suits me because I am a morning person. And because the afternoon light in West Virginia in summer is the kind that makes everything look slightly overexposed. My commute is 11 minutes, door to door, walking. I pass the Pullman Square shops on 3rd Avenue, a mix of local restaurants and chain retail that the city has been trying to revitalize since I was in college. And if I'm running with time to spare, I stop at the Starbucks on the corner for a medium dark roast. No room, which is the same order I've had since the location opened in 2017. These details matter to me, not because they're interesting, but because they're mine. I chose every one of them. The apartment, the walk, the coffee order. In a life where so much was determined by other people's needs, I had built a set of small, specific, entirely personal choices, and I protected them the way some people protect much larger things. At work, I sat at the third desk from the window on the north side of the office. I had a system, color-coded file tabs, a two-step verification habit I developed on my own before it became official protocol, a personal rule that I never cleared a file I wasn't certain about just to clear the backlog. My supervisor, Terrence, who has been managing our office since 2015 and who has the specific energy of a man who has seen everything and decided to find it mostly amusing, told me once that I was the most useful person in the office because I was constitutionally incapable of pretending I hadn't noticed something. He meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. On the corner of my desk, I kept a small barrel cactus that Terrence had given me at my 5-year anniversary as a joke gift, with a card that said, "For the person least likely to need anything." I kept it because it was true in the way that jokes are true when they're not entirely jokes. I watered it when I thought about it. It survived regardless. My personal laptop, like the one I kept at home, like separate from my work machine, had a folder labeled house stuff. There was no house. The folder contained a spreadsheet I had been maintaining since March of 2018, tracking every dollar I had transferred to my family, not to keep score. I told myself for years that I was not keeping score. What I was doing, I understand now, was the thing I do at work, creating a paper trail for a discrepancy I could not yet name, but could feel the shape of in the dark. My family. My mother is Renata Marsh. She is 61 years old. She has worked the front desk at Cabell Huntington Hospital, check-in, scheduling, patient intake, for 26 years. In that time, she has learned every system they've upgraded, outlasted 4 different department heads, and developed the particular authority of a person who's been in one place long enough that the institution bends slightly around her rather than the other way. She is a small woman with very straight posture and the habit of phrasing requests as announcements. She does not ask for things. She states that things are going to happen and then waits for the appropriate response. The appropriate response in our family was mine to provide. My sister Priscilla is 32, 4 years younger than me, which in our family translated to an entirely different set of rules. A fact I registered as a child and spent my 20s persuading myself I had misread. I had not misread it. Priscilla has 2 daughters, a husband named Dwight, who installs commercial HVAC systems and who approaches life with the uncomplicated cheerfulness of a man who's never been required to be uncomfortable, and a quality I have spent years trying to name accurately without bitterness. She is gifted at describing her own problems in a way that makes the listener feel personally responsible for resolving them. It is not malice. It is something older than malice, a skill developed so early and practiced so thoroughly that she no longer knows she's doing it. I want to be careful here because Priscilla is not the villain of this story. That distinction matters to me. She benefited from what was done. Whether she knew the full scope, I will tell you what I believe, and I will tell you how I arrived at that belief, and I will let you decide what to do with it. I remember being 29 years old the week after my senior examiner promotion at Sunday dinner at my mother's house on Norway Avenue. The house is a 2-story, 3-bedroom craftsman that my mother has rented since 1999. With a front porch she has decorated every season since I can remember. Pumpkins in October, an artificial wreath at Christmas, a small American flag on the 4th of July that she replaces every other year when the weather has faded past dignity. The kitchen smells like the same candle she's burned since I was 12. Vanilla and something underneath it. Cedar, maybe. The specific scent of every important conversation I have ever had with my mother. That Sunday, I mentioned the promotion at the table, not at length. In passing, the way you mentioned something good that happened, the way you'd mentioned the weather had been nice. My mother said, "That's wonderful, Dee." She said it the way she said everything good that happened to me, warmly, briefly, and then with a pivot so smooth I'd stop noticing it. The pivot that Sunday was Priscilla's car. New tires needed. Could anyone help? The conversation moved to Priscilla's tires and stayed there. My mother served Priscilla the last of the cornbread. The good cornbread, the cast iron skillet kind, the kind she made twice a year, and that I had been looking forward to since I walked in, without asking if anyone else wanted any. Priscilla took it without noticing that she'd taken it. My father, who had died in 2016, used to say that the way you find out what a family values is to watch what they do with the last piece of something good. I said it about other people's families. I understand now he was describing ours. I didn't say anything about the cornbread. I went home and I entered $400, Priscilla's tires, in my spreadsheet. Said Priscilla is the one we worry about. Said Priscilla is the one we worry about. And Delia is the one we rely on. It was administered the way a climate is administered. Through 1,000 small daily decisions, none of them individually decisive, all of them together, creating the weather of a childhood. By the time I was old enough to name the pattern, I had already been shaped by it so completely that the naming felt academic, like being told the name of the water you'd been swimming in since before you could walk. What I gave them, between 2018 and 2021 in specific amounts, I kept in a spreadsheet that I never showed anyone. The first entry, March 14th, 2018, $400. Priscilla's car tires. The call had come on a Thursday morning. My mother's voice carrying the specific cadence of a problem that had already been decided. Decided that it was a family problem. Decided that the family was me. We need to figure out Priscilla's tires before the weekend. The we in that sentence, I had learned over a decade, was always singular. I transferred the money that afternoon from my checking account at BB&T. I wrote in the spreadsheet, no repayment column, not because I was bitter, because I was accurate. June 2018, $635. My mother's car insurance lapsed. A 3-month lapse she'd managed by borrowing the car of a neighbor until the neighbor needed it back. The call came on a Sunday. My mother's voice was measured, the way it always was when she needed something significant, not lying, not pleading, just stating, I need to get the insurance back before Renata from next door needs her car this week. I sent the $635 via Zelle. She said, thank you. She always said thank you. The thank you is real. That's the part that made it complicated. November 2019, $1,640. Priscilla's transmission. I didn't have it liquid. I had $2,100 in checking, and $1,640 was most of it, which meant I spent December eating at home and declining 2 invitations to things I would have liked to attend. I remember standing in my kitchen on the afternoon I made the transfer, looking out my east-facing window at the parking lot below and the ridge of trees past it, bare by November, and thinking, this is the 3rd year I've done something like this in November. I thought it the way you think something you know is significant, and then choose not to pursue. A note to yourself that you fold up and put away. August 2020. My mother's dental work, a crown and a partial. Medicare covered the base procedure, The cost share and the partial were out of pocket. $2,219. This one came with a conversation about what it felt like at her age to not be able to afford her own health care. My mother is not a manipulative woman in the way people mean that word. She does not engineer guilt consciously. She simply describes her reality with complete emotional honesty and trusts that people who love her will respond appropriately. It is a form of manipulation so guileless, it is almost beautiful. I paid $2,219 and sat in the waiting room at the dental office on 5th Street while they did the work because she'd asked me to be there and because I was the person who was there when things needed doing. Priscilla did not come. Nobody asked why. January 2021, $890. A layer. Priscilla's oldest daughter needed a learning assessment. I want to be precise here. I did not resent this one. A child's educational needs are not negotiable, and I paid without hesitation. But I remember Priscilla texting me the assessment report afterward, a photo, casual, with a caption that said, "Thank you, means so much." And then not texting again for 6 weeks, not to check in, not to say how the assessment had gone. The gratitude had the shelf life of the moment it was expressed, and then it was over. And I was back to being the resource rather than the person. I want to stop here and tell you something I didn't understand for a long time. The money was never the real injury. I mean that. $23,000 accumulated over 3 years was real money. Money that would have been a different apartment, a different savings account, a different set of options at 33 than the ones I had. That matters. But the actual injury, the one that lived underneath the money and made the money possible, was something else. It was the specific training I had received over the course of my entire life to understand my own needs as secondary, not secondary to Priscilla's, secondary to the family's. And the family in practice meant the people whose needs were most loudly expressed, which was never me, because I had learned very early that my needs expressed loudly made people uncomfortable, while my needs expressed quietly were simply not addressed, while my needs not expressed at all were rewarded with a description easy and reliable and the one we don't worry about. I had spent 33 years being the one they didn't worry about. Then, in October 2021, I had surgery. It was a laparoscopic procedure for endometriosis, a condition I'd been managing since I was 28 with medication and quarterly monitoring, a condition that had finally progressed to the point where medication was no longer sufficient, and the monitoring had become a formality we performed to confirm what we already knew. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday at St. Mary's Medical Center on 5th Avenue in Huntington, approximately half a mile from my apartment. Routine laparoscopic, the surgeon told me, 3 hours under general anesthesia, 1-night observation, home by Thursday if everything was uncomplicated. Everything was uncomplicated surgically. My mother came to the hospital. She sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. When I came out of the anesthesia recovery, slowly, the way you surface from general anesthesia, the ceiling materializing first, then the light, then the sounds, then the recognition of where you are. She was there. She was sitting in the chair beside the bed with her hands folded in her lap and her face carrying the expression she always had when she was worried about something and trying not to show it. She held my hand when I reached for something to hold on to. I want to include that I want to be precise about the fact that she was there, that she held my hand, that the love in that moment was real. The love is always real. That is the part that takes the longest to integrate, that everything that came after could exist alongside the love, that the two things did not cancel each other, that a person can hold your hand when you're frightened and also do what she did, and both of those things can be true at the same time. I was home by Thursday. I was on prescription pain management, oxycodone, 5 days, which made me slow and foggy and capable of very little beyond lying on my couch, watching television, and sleeping. My mother came over Thursday evening with food she'd made, soup, cornbread, the kind of care that is entirely real and entirely genuine, and that I accepted without any awareness of what else was happening. What was happening? At some point during or immediately following my hospitalization, the exact date on the document was October the 29th, 3 days post-surgery, a power of attorney was drafted and filed. The document authorized my mother, Renata Marsh, to act as my representative in financial matters. The authorization signature on the document was mine. I do not remember signing it. I was on oxycodone on October 29th. I have the prescription log from the pharmacy on 7th Avenue. I have the discharge paperwork from St. Mary's. I have the medication administration record from my one night of observation. On October 29th, 2021, I was not in a condition to sign a federal authorization document with full legal comprehension of what I was signing. I did not know the POA existed until July of 2024. In November 2021, approximately 6 weeks after my surgery, a representative payee application was filed with the Social Security Administration. The application claimed that my mother, Renata Marsh, had developed a qualifying disability and required a representative payee to manage her federal benefit payments. The representative payee listed on the application was her daughter, Delia R. Marsh. The supporting authorization, the power of attorney, dated October 29th. The SSA processed the application. Benefits were approved. The first payment processed in December 2021, $2,847 per month. Deposited to a WestBanco checking account at the 5th Avenue branch, account number I had never seen under my name, for 31 months. December 2021 through June 2024, $88,257. I want you to sit with that number for a moment, not because of the drama of it, because of the arithmetic. 31 months is 2 years and 7 months. It is the length of time between my surgery and the Tuesday afternoon in July when I pulled a file from a routine audit batch and saw my own name. For 31 months, I went to work every day. I caught other people's discrepancies. I processed hundreds of representative payee cases, applications, authorizations, payment verifications, and not one of them was mine. Not one of them told me what was happening 3 blocks from my mother's house, at a bank branch I had no reason to walk into, in an account I had no reason to know existed. For 31 months, I transferred money to my family from my own checking account. The spreadsheet entries continued. March 2022, $340 for Dwight's work truck repair. July 2022, $217 for Priscilla's youngest's school supplies, sent via Venmo with no note because notes felt accusatory. November 2022, $1,100 for my mother's heating unit, which had stopped working in the first cold week of November, and which my mother described as an emergency in the specific tone she reserved for things she had decided I would handle. I handled it. Meanwhile, $2,847 per month, every month, into an account I didn't know existed. The Tuesday in July was ordinary in every way. The Tuesdays in July are ordinary. Hot. The kind of Huntington summer heat that makes the asphalt on 8th Street look soft by mid-afternoon. I'd brought my lunch from home, a habit I'd maintained for 3 years as a budget measure that had outlasted its original necessity because I'd gotten used to it. Leftover rice, some chicken, a container of the cold brew I made on Sundays, and kept in the refrigerator in a mason jar. My desk was clean. My inbox was cleared to the point I was comfortable with. I was running the quarterly quality review batch. 47 representative payee cases pulled for random review, standard documentation verification. I was on case 31 of 47 when I saw my name. I read it once. I read it a second time. I put my pen down flat on the desk with a care that was not about the pen. The heating unit in the office, there's always a heating unit somewhere in a federal building that doesn't work correctly, was doing something in the wall to my left. Terrence's office door was open. I could hear him on the phone, his voice low and even, the particular tone he used when he was managing someone's frustration. A phone rang at the far end of the room. Someone laughed at something near the printer. I was very still. I did not feel what people describe feeling in moments like this. I did not feel my stomach drop. I did not feel my hands go cold. I felt instead a very specific kind of stillness. The stillness that comes not from shock, but from recognition. The way you feel when something you've been avoiding looking at directly is suddenly directly in front of you, and the looking is finally happening, and the thing is exactly the shape you feared it would be. I pulled the full file. The POA authorization was on page 4. My signature, or something that had been made to look like my signature, on the designated line. I looked at it for a long time. I know my own signature the way I know my own handwriting, not abstractly, but specifically. The capital D in my last name has a small hook at the baseline. A quirk I developed in 7th grade when my English teacher told me my handwriting was illegible, and I overcorrected in a way I never fully uncorrected. The hook was there in the document, but the pressure was wrong. The baseline drift on the second letter of Marsh was wrong. The spacing between letters was slightly too even. The spacing of someone who was copying rather than writing. I had found that pattern in other people's files hundreds of times. I looked at the date, October 29th, 2021, 3 days post-surgery. I pulled up my personal calendar on my phone, the one I kept for personal appointments, doctor's visits, prescriptions. October 29th, 2021. Refill Oxy, stay home. Mom coming at 4. My mother had come at 4 o'clock on October 29th. I looked at the payment routing, West Banco, 5th Avenue branch, an account number that had no connection to anything I could identify. I looked at the beneficiary information, the disability classification, the onset date. The beneficiary was Renata Marsh, my mother. I need you to understand the specific architecture of what I was looking at. My mother had filed for SSDI disability benefits in November 2021. She had listed me as her representative payee, the person authorized to receive and manage her benefit payments on her behalf. The authorization was a POA signed 3 days after my surgery, when I was on opioid pain medication and not capable of meaningful legal consent. The payments had been deposited for 31 months to an account I'd never opened. The total, $88,257. I sat at my desk for 11 minutes without moving. I know it was 11 minutes because I checked the time when I pulled the file and checked it again when I finally closed it. The barrel cactus was in the afternoon light. I had watered it on Friday. It didn't need the water. I had given it anyway because giving something care when it didn't need care was a habit so old I'd stopped noticing I was doing it. I thought about that for a while. Then I opened a new browser tab. I went back through every representative payee case I had processed in the past 3 years. Not all of them. I pulled cases by address, by beneficiary name, by payment routing. I was thorough. I was the kind of thorough that had gotten me promoted twice and commended once in a federal performance review. I found nothing else connected to my identity. The fraud was contained to one case, one account, one forged document. 31 months. I closed the browser. I completed the remaining 16 cases in my audit batch. I did not flag the case that day. I needed to understand the full scope before I moved, and I needed to be certain, not the certainty of reasonable doubt, but the certainty of a federal claims examiner who knows what evidence needs to look like before it goes to the Office of Inspector General. I went home. I made dinner. I ate it standing at my kitchen counter because sitting down felt like something I needed to earn, and I hadn't figured out yet what the currency was. At 9 o'clock that night, I opened my spreadsheet and I looked at it for a long time. Every entry since 2018, every amount, every date, every person. The column I'd never added, the repayment column, the blank space that had been accurate from the beginning. I added a new column. I labeled it what I know now. And then I sat at my kitchen table in the specific silence of a person who has found out something they cannot unknow. And I thought about the last 31 months. Every family dinner I'd attended. Every call I'd answered. Every transfer I'd made from my own shrinking checking account to people who were simultaneously routing $2,847 per month through my stolen identity into an account I didn't know existed. The total amount they had taken without my knowledge, $88,257. The total amount I'd given willingly during the same period, $9,340. The total amount I'd given willingly across all years, $23,440. I sat with a combined number, $111,687, and I felt something I want to try to describe accurately because I think it matters. I did not feel rage. I felt the specific grief of someone who realizes that the relationship they were inside was not the relationship they believed they were inside, or not a betrayal by a stranger. Something harder. The grief of looking at someone you love, who loves you, and understanding that the love was real and was also not sufficient protection. That it was possible to be loved and also to be used, and that these two things had coexisted for so long inside the same family that neither the love nor the use had been visible clearly. Have you ever known something for a long time without letting yourself know it? The discovery doesn't feel like a shock. It feels like confirmation. Drop a yes or no in the comments. I knew something was off in late 2022 when my mother mentioned casually that she'd been able to contribute to a vacation Priscilla and Dwight took to Myrtle Beach. My mother had not had discretionary vacation money in the years I'd known her as an adult. I registered the anomaly and I moved on. I told myself she'd been saving. I understand now that she'd been receiving $2,847 per month for a year by then, and that saving was accurate. Just not in the way I meant it. I made that choice, the choice not to look closer. I want to be honest about that because the version of this story where I was simply a victim, where the only thing happening was something done to me, is not entirely accurate. The fully accurate version includes the fact that I was a federal claims examiner who knew what fraud looked like and who chose in her own personal life not to apply the same scrutiny she applied at work. I made that choice because the cost of looking was the cost of knowing, and the cost of knowing was the cost of acting, and the cost of acting was the cost of losing the only family I had. I made that choice for years. I own it, not as self-blame, as clarity. There is a woman named Celestine who works in the OIG liaison office out of the Charleston Regional Hub. We met in 2022 at a 2-day claims administration training seminar. the kind of professional development event you attend because your supervisor puts it on your calendar and you go because you take your certification seriously. We'd sat at the same table at lunch on the first day. She was direct in the way that people who have dealt with institutional fraud for long enough become direct, not harsh, just unbothered by the gap between what's convenient and what's true. We'd stayed in occasional professional contact. She'd sent me an article about a policy update in January. I'd responded. That was the last exchange. I texted her on a Wednesday morning in late July, 2 weeks after the Tuesday. I said I needed a second opinion on a documentation question. Clinical. No names. She called me that afternoon, 40 minutes after the text. I described the case, hypothetically. The forged POA, the payment routing, the timeline relative to a medical event. I asked her, in her experience, what was the most common scenario behind a representative payee account set up at a branch the named payee had no established relationship with. She was quiet for 3 seconds. In my experience, she said, it's almost always because the named payee wasn't the one who set it up. Then, is this hypothetical? I was quiet. Okay, she said, when you're ready to not be hypothetical anymore, call me directly. Not text, call. I hung up and sat in my car in the parking garage on 9th Street for 20 minutes. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The garage smelled like oil and concrete and the specific enclosed heat of a West Virginia summer. I sat with both hands on the steering wheel and I let myself arrive at the thing I had been approaching for 2 weeks. My mother had done this. Not Priscilla. Not Dwight. My mother. Priscilla may have known some portion of it. I believed then and believe now that she didn't know the full scope. But I also believe she understood that money was arriving from somewhere her mother wouldn't fully explain, and that she made the same choice I had made for years, the choice not to look. The choice is not innocent just because it's understandable. But my mother had done this. She had come to the hospital when I was in surgery. She had sat in the waiting room. She had come to my apartment on the 3rd day after with soup and cornbread and genuine worry. And at some point in the overlap of those true things, she had also acquired a document with my forged signature and used it to file a federal benefits claim and route $2,847 per month into an account I didn't know existed. Both of those things were true. I needed to be able to hold both of those things without letting either one dissolve the other. The love was real. The fraud was real. The woman who held my hand and the woman who forged my signature were the same woman. That night in my apartment, I made a decision, not about the confrontation, about myself first. I called the West Virginia State Bar Referral Service and asked for a federal employment attorney with experience in benefit fraud cases, specifically cases involving identity misuse in SSA filings. I got a name. I made an appointment for the following Thursday. I opened a new checking account at MVB Bank, a bank my mother had no account at, a branch on 4th Avenue I'd never mentioned to anyone. I set up a direct deposit split, $450 per paycheck, automatic, into the new account. I was building something for myself, not out of rage, out of the specific logic of a person who has just understood that the foundation they'd been standing on was not solid, and who has decided to build something solid before doing anything else. Over the next 3 weeks, I assembled the documentation. The original POA filing, obtained through a FOIA request to the state records office, the claims application, the payment routing history, 31 months, every transaction, the signature comparison I'd conducted and documented in writing, referencing my professional credentials and the specific technical variances I'd identified. The hospital records from St. Mary's, obtained with my own signature on a records release. The prescription log from the pharmacy on 7th Avenue. The discharge paperwork. And one more document. I want to tell you about this one carefully. When I pulled my mother's SSDI application, I saw the qualifying disability listed. I won't specify the condition here, not because it wasn't real, because I don't know whether it was real, and that uncertainty is something I've had to sit with. What I know is that the application was filed 6 weeks after my surgery. What I know is that the timing, in retrospect, was not coincidental. What I know is that my mother, at the time, had reasons to want money that she didn't have to explain to anyone. Reasons connected to my father's death, to the cost of keeping a house alone on a hospital front desk salary, to the specific financial terror of being 60 years old with no retirement savings and 2 daughters, one of whom you have learned to rely on completely and one of whom you believe needs protecting. I'm not saying that justifies what she did. I am saying I understood it, and that understanding it was in some ways harder than not understanding it would have been. Sigh. Priscilla's oldest daughter graduated from Marshall University's College of Business in May of 2024. I had known about the graduation since March. Priscilla had called me, which was not common, to say she wanted the whole family there. My mother had called me separately, which was the confirmation that attendance was not optional. It would mean so much to have everyone together, my mother said. It's been a hard year. We need something good. I said I would be there. I meant it, just not in the way she understood it. The Cam Henderson Center on the Marshall campus holds 12,000 people when it's full and approximately 400 graduating students when it's hosting a college commencement. The business college ceremony was May 17th, 10 a.m. Formal dress requested. I arrived at 9:40. I wore my navy blazer, the one I wore to federal hearings, the one I'd owned for 4 years and maintained carefully because it was the best piece of clothing I owned, and because there are garments that make you feel like you know exactly what you're doing, and that blazer was mine. I had the folder in my bag, a standard file folder, nothing dramatic, the kind I use at work every day. I found my family in the section my mother had texted me about, Section D, Row 7. She was there in her rose-colored blouse, the one with the small buttons, the good one. Priscilla beside her, Dwight beside Priscilla, the youngest granddaughter in the end seat, with her phone. My mother's face when she saw me, warm, relieved, the specific expression of someone who had been hoping I would show up and had not been certain I would. She reached out and squeezed my arm. I'm so glad you're here, she said. I know, I said. She didn't register the difference. There were 2 women from Cabell Huntington Hospital sitting in the row behind ours, colleagues of my mother invited to watch her granddaughter graduate, women named Sylvia and Patrice, who had worked with my mother for 11 and 14 years, respectively, my mother's professional community. The people whose opinion of her I knew carried real weight in the texture of her daily life. Terrence from my office was in Section C, 3 rows up. His nephew was in the graduating class. He caught my eye when I sat down and gave me the small nod that means good. You made it. He did not know why I was there beyond a graduation. He would know later. The ceremony was 90 minutes. Processional, remarks by the university president, the dean of the College of Business, an address by a graduating student whose name I don't remember, but who was poised and prepared and clearly going to be fine. When Priscilla's daughter's name was called, Kaylee Vance, College of Business, Bachelor of Science, my mother's hand went to her mouth. Real tears. The specific overflow of a grandmother watching a grandchild accomplish something. I watched her cry, and I felt the full complexity of that moment. Love, genuine and uncomplicated. Grief for the version of this relationship I had believed in for 36 years, and something else, a kind of steadiness. The steadiness of a person who has already decided what they're going to do and is no longer afraid of doing it. After the ceremony, in the reception area outside the arena, a wide concrete plaza with the Marshall fountain and the spring light coming in at an angle that made everything look slightly cinematic. The kind of light that belongs in a different moment than the one you're actually in. My family gathered. My mother was in the center of a small group. Priscilla, Dwight, Sylvia, and Patrice. Kaylee, in her gown, still holding her diploma case. I stepped close to my mother. Mom. She turned. Her face was still warm from the ceremony, still in the residue of pride. Before we go to dinner, I said, I need you to look at something. I took the folder from my bag. I set the first page on the top of the concrete barrier between us. It was the POA authorization. Her name as my representative, the forged signature, the date, October 29th, 2021. She looked at it. Not the look of someone confronting something unexpected. The look of someone who has been waiting for a long time for something to arrive and has developed a practice neutrality for the moment it does. Delia, she said, this isn't... The date is 3 days after my surgery. I have the anesthesia records. I have the prescription log. I was on oxycodone. I was not capable of signing this. Priscilla had come closer. Dwight had stepped back. Not away, but back, the specific retreat of a man who has understood that what's happening is beyond his domain. The second page. Payment routing. Wes Banco, 5th Avenue. Account number, 31 months, $2,847 per month. Each payment dated, each deposit confirmed. Sylvia, behind my mother, had moved slightly. She could see the page. She was not looking away. Delia! My mother's voice was lower now. I was going to explain. The total is $88,257, I said. That's on the third page. And so I set it down. The OIG disclosure form, filed 4 days prior, case number already assigned. The silence that followed was not a dramatic silence. It was the specific quiet of a group of people who have just understood simultaneously that the social occasion they were attending has changed into something else entirely. Priscilla's hand had gone to her collarbone. Dwight was looking at the ground. Kaylee, still in her graduation gown 10 feet away, had not noticed and was taking photos with friends. I was glad she hadn't noticed. My mother looked at the OIG form for a long moment. When she looked up, her face had done something I had never seen it do. For 1 second, one real unguarded second before she reassembled herself, she looked like the woman she had been before she had made the decision that her fear mattered more than my identity. She looked old in a way that had nothing to do with age. She looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and who had just had it taken from her and did not know yet whether to feel relief or terror. I was going to pay it back, she said. I had prepared myself for that sentence. I had known, with the certainty of someone who has known their mother for 36 years, that this was what she would say. And I had armored myself against it, or thought I had. But there is a difference between knowing what someone will say and hearing them say it. The specific grammar of it, I was wrong, but I was going to pay it back, which is the grammar of someone who has located a version of events in which they were still fundamentally intending to do right. Intending. 31 months, I said. You were going to pay back $88,257 on a hospital front desk salary. She didn't answer. Sylvia said very quietly, Renata, Just the name, not a question. The specific sound of someone who has worked beside a person for 11 years and is hearing, in this moment, a story that explains things she had wondered about and not asked. Sylvia stepped to the side. She had her phone in her hand. I don't know who she called. I didn't ask then, and I haven't asked since. What I know is that she stepped away, and that the stepping away in front of Patrice, in front of Dwight, in a space that my mother had understood as safe and known, was the thing that could not be undone. You can manage a conversation. You cannot manage a witness. Stepping away to make a call. My mother looked at me, and in her eyes, behind the controlled surface of her expression, I saw something I had been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. Not remorse. Remorse was too clean for what this was. Something older. The specific fear of a woman who had decided that her survival required a certain kind of taking, and who had told herself the story of that taking in a way that let her keep her self-concept intact, and who was now in a moment where the story had run out of room. I was scared, she said, very quietly. After your father died, you know how scared I was. I know, I said. That's in the application too. The disability onset, I read the whole file. She opened her mouth. I know you were scared, I said. I was there when he died. I arranged the funeral. I handled the probate. I sat with you for 3 weeks after because you said you couldn't be alone. I know exactly how scared you were, and I know that fear is real. But fear is not what happened to me. What happened to me has a case number, Priscilla said from behind my mother. Delia, please. How much did you know? I said. Not loudly, just a question asked directly, in the tone I used at work when I needed an accurate answer and the person across from me was deciding whether to give one. Priscilla was quiet for 3 seconds. Not the amount, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I believed her. I want to say that clearly. I believed her when she said she didn't know the full amount. What I believe about the rest, about what she knew, about what she chose not to ask, about the vacation to Myrtle Beach and the deck in Barbersville and the new couch and all the material ease that had arrived without full explanation. That is more complicated. I am still arriving at what I believe. I am not there yet. Dwight said nothing. He had not said a word since the first page went on the barrier. He stood with his hands at his sides, looking at a point somewhere between the ground and the middle distance, the posture of a man who has just understood that the family he married into contained something he did not fully know about, and who is deciding in real time what that means for him. I picked up the 3 pages. I put them back in the folder. I smoothed the folder against my side. My blazer was warm in the May heat, but I didn't take it off. I looked at my mother one final time. The OIG will be in contact. I said, you should get a lawyer before that happens. I looked at Priscilla. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that the moment hadn't already said. I walked to my car. Behind me, I heard Sylvia say something to Patrice in a low voice. I heard Dwight say Priscilla's name. I heard, faintly, my mother say something I couldn't make out. I did not look back. My car was on the 3rd level of the parking structure on Hal Greer Boulevard. I took the stairs. The stairwell smelled like concrete and something faintly metallic. My footsteps on the stairs were the only sound. I counted them without meaning to. 14 steps per flight. 2 flights. 28 steps from the reception plaza to the 3rd level. I know this, the way you know things you weren't trying to remember. What? I sat in my car. I did not cry. I did not feel the release people describe feeling after a confrontation. I felt the specific flatness of a long-held thing finally put down. Not relief, exactly. The absence of a weight is not the same as lightness It is its own distinct state. I sat in that state for a while and let it be what it was. Terrence texted at 7:04 p.m. "You okay? You left fast." I replied, "Yeah, I'll explain Monday." He replied, "Okay, cactus is fine." I checked. I sat in my apartment that night with my laptop open and the spreadsheet on the screen. I looked at all of it. 6 years, every entry, every amount, every date. The column that had no repayment data. The column I'd labeled "What I Know Now," which I had opened on the night I found the file and not yet filled in. I looked at the total for a long time. Then I opened a new tab, new spreadsheet. I titled it with the date, May 17th, 2024, and I created one column. Mine, first entry, $450, automatic transfer, MVB Bank. I closed the old spreadsheet. Not deleted. Closed. I watered the small plant I keep on my kitchen windowsill. A succulent, not a cactus. Though the difference is minor. I'd bought it in February at the farmer's market on 8th Street. It didn't need water. I gave it some anyway. And then I stood at the window for a while and looked at the parking lot below and the ridge of trees past it in the May dark, just beginning to be visible at the edges as the city lights caught the new leaves. In the months after, the OIG opened a formal investigation in August 2024. My mother retained a criminal defense attorney through the West Virginia State Public Defender's Office. The West Banco account was frozen in September pending investigation. As of this recording, the case is moving the way federal cases move, with paperwork, with process, without drama or speed. There will be consequences. I have been told to expect them within the next 12 to 18 months. What specifically those consequences will be is not yet determined. I am cooperating fully. I have submitted every document I assembled. I have been interviewed twice by OIG investigators. I have answered every question accurately, including the questions about the money I gave willingly, the entries in my spreadsheet, the years of transfers that I made without legal compulsion and that cannot be reclaimed. Those facts are part of the record. I wanted them to be. My mother lost something significant at Cabell Huntington Hospital, though not her position. The investigation is federal, not professional, and the hospital has not been involved directly. What she lost was harder to quantify. The specific standing of a person who has been known and trusted in a community for 26 years and who has had, in front of two of the people who knew her best in that community, something true revealed. Sylvia and Patrice know what they heard and saw. That knowledge lives in the hallways she walks every day. That is not nothing. Priscilla texted me in June. The text said, "I didn't know the full amount. I want you to know that." I read it 3 times. I have not responded. I am holding that text the way you hold something that might be true and might be the beginning of something, or might be self-protection dressed as honesty. And either way, the holding requires more time than I currently have. I will know when I know. I'm not rushing it. My mother called me in August. I answered because I decided beforehand that I would answer the first call. She said, "I don't know what to say to you." I said, "You don't have to say anything right now." She said, "Well, I am your mother." I said, "I know." That was the whole conversation. I don't know what comes after it. I'm letting that be unresolved because it is unresolved, and because pretending it isn't would cost me something I have just started to afford to keep. What I know now that I didn't before. I was good at finding fraud in other people's files because I had been trained by 9 years of professional practice and by 36 years of family to locate the discrepancy everyone else missed. The difference is that at work, I was expected to act on what I found. At home, I'd spent years developing an elaborate practice of finding things and then choosing not to act because Acting had a cost I'd never been willing to pay. The cost was not what I thought it was. I thought the cost was the family. What I understand now is that the family I thought I was protecting was not the family that actually existed. The family that actually existed was already charging me more than I knew. That is the thing I know now, not a lesson, not advice, a specific fact about my own history that I did not have before and that I have now. I renewed the lease on my apartment on Hal Greer Boulevard in September. 12 months? My name only. I signed the paperwork at the management office on a Thursday afternoon, a regular ballpoint pen, the same one I'd been using since July. I didn't think about that until I was standing at the kitchen counter with the signed copy in my hand. I thought, that's the first thing I've signed in 3 years that I actually remember signing. I put the copy in the file folder I keep for apartment documents. I made dinner. I ate it sitting down. If you stayed for this story, 20 minutes of your time, which is real time you could have spent somewhere else. I want you to know that means something to me that I don't have a clean way to say. If you've ever been the person in your family that everyone calls when something needs handling, and you've never once asked yourself what it would cost you to stop being that person, this story is for you, not as a warning, as a mirror. If you recognized yourself in the part about choosing not to look, about knowing something was wrong and deciding very deliberately and for reasons that made complete sense at the time not to look closer, drop a comment below. Tell me what you told yourself. I want to read it. New story coming soon. Take care of yourselves.